Acidity of the conceptual context to an audience beyond academic boundaries. Our different backgrounds also strengthen the bisociative connections between extreme sports and concepts and ideas framing and shaping human behaviors and organizational practices and processes. Finding parallels and connecting the seemingly different worlds of extreme sports and business makes our book unusual and different to most other textbooks in extreme sports and business. Studies that have used mainstream sports data to advance management theory are still embryonic. And although extreme context research is growing and matters, its fragmentation risks limiting its potential for advancing management and organization studies. Our book can be considered as a starting point and orientation for businessmen and women wanting to advance their own development and that of their peers and organizations. This is why we address each chapter theme from an individual and organizational perspective. Although many textbooks like to propose a 5 or 10 steps to success fits all approach, we provide detailed endnotes and suggestions for further reading instead, and takeaways summing up the key learning points at the end of each chapter. Chapters are written independently from each other, which means that certain terms or scholars are briefly reintroduced. Following this introduction, we start the adventure in Chapter 2 by exploring how to achieve the seemingly unthinkable and how to reach exceptional goals. It is not only a decisive process in extreme adventure performances, but one that is also critical for every businessman and woman and their career development. In Chapter 3, we discuss how to deal with uncertainty and the unknown. Even though decision-makers and organizations operate today in a world that has become increasingly uncertain, most companies and their leaders continue to be hugely unprepared for the unpredictable. In Chapter 4, we explore the many facets and implications of fear of the known and unknown, fear as a warning signal, as a self-analytical tool, and as a motivational method. Chapter 5 addresses a topic against which companies are profoundly biased. We show that failure is an opportunity for personal and professional self-development and growth, for learning and change instead of one of blaming. Despite the evidence that death awareness is an integral part of the aging process, and despite that there are numerous professions and businesses in which death and mortality play salient roles in the daily routines of their decision-makers and employees, organizational scholars have rarely addressed and explored the role of death awareness, death, and mortality in organizational life. In Chapter 6, we make up for this scholarly shortcoming, and similar to the case of mortality, we want to show you some of the positive implications of suffering, our theme for Chapter 7. Whereas organization scholars have largely focused on the negative consequences of mental and physical suffering at the workplace, we show how suffering for a particular goal and reason can positively influence your willpower, self-control, and state of mind. In Chapter 8, we expand the understanding of leadership and decision-making in extreme conditions and contexts. Much has been written about leadership and decision-making in a general business and management context. However, in extreme conditions, such as the death zone, the two topics start to show very different dynamics. So far, however, within the leadership field, leadership in extreme contexts has been one of the least researched areas, whereas decision-making under extreme conditions has been predominantly discussed in specialized fields such as the military. In our final chapter, we explore speed and lightness. As has been the case for many of the themes that we address throughout this book, there are only a few management and organization studies, texts, or concepts which have addressed lightness and speed in the conventional sense, or in the way described by Ben in the context of mountaineering. This came as a surprise to us, and we hope we can show you why in Chapter 9. The final chapter is about Ben. In times in which work-life balance is on everybody's mind, Stefan felt that Ben should share how he manages to train and prepare for an 8,000-meter speed ascent, run a global business, and have a family with 3 little kids and a wife at the same time. Of course, this last Chapter 10 also addresses some other key issues that are on many businessmen and women's minds, including topics such as sustainability and responsible